It was the kind of morning that made silence feel alive. The fog hung low over the edge of the woods, curling between trees and wrapping the fence posts in a gauzy veil. Birds had not yet broken the quiet with their songs, and the only sound was the distant creak of the porch swing, moving gently in the early breeze. He sat there, as he always did, boots half-laced and a chipped mug of black coffee steaming between his palms. And at his feet, curled close like a shadow, lay the dog. Golden brown, long-eared, with a nose always twitching even in his sleep. A mutt by any official definition, but something else entirely to him. Not a pet, not even really a companion. A piece of his soul that just happened to have 4 legs and a heartbeat. He reached down, knuckles brushing the thick fur between the dog's ears. "Come on, boy," he said softly. "Let's take the long trail today." The dog opened one eye, then the other, then stretched, long and low, tail wagging once. He stood, shook off sleep, and fell into step without being told. The woods were waking up slowly. Beams of light broke through the trees in scattered shafts, catching dust motes mid-air like suspended stars. The dirt trail wound through brush and bramble, past forgotten tree stumps and moss-slick rocks. To most, it was just a path, but to the two of them, it was a memory lane paved with hundreds of shared mornings. They walked in sync, each footstep matched by a soft pad of paws. When the man stopped to check the bark of a tree or trace a claw mark, the dog waited patiently. When the dog perked his ears and darted toward a rustle in the brush, the man followed with amused caution. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. It had always been like that. Ever since the dog had wandered up to the man's porch 5 years ago, just a scraggly, shivering pup during the worst storm of the season. No collar, no hesitation, just soaked fur and trembling legs and those eyes. That was the night the silence had found its voice. That morning, they reached the clearing just as the sun broke the tree line. It was a small open patch near the stream, where the grass grew wild and the wind carried the scent of water and pine. It had become their usual resting spot, and the dog knew it. He bounded ahead, tail wagging, paws kicking up dew. The man chuckled. "Show off," he muttered, sitting down on a fallen log and stretching his legs. The coffee mug had long since been emptied, but the warmth of it remained in his hands. The dog circled, sniffed, then dropped to the ground with a satisfied sigh. And then he froze. It was so fast that at first the man didn't notice. But the sudden stillness, the complete halt of motion in the dog's body, snapped his attention. "What is it?" The dog didn't respond. His ears flicked. His eyes locked on something just ahead. The man followed his gaze. The grass. It was moving, but not like wind, like something slithering. His breath caught. He stood slowly, eyes narrowing. At first, he saw nothing. Then a flash of movement. Brown, coiled, low. He took a step back. And that was enough. The snake struck. It happened faster than a blink. The grass parted. A hiss cut the air. And the dog, without a sound, launched forward. Straight into the strike. The man shouted, too late. The dog collided with the snake midair, his jaws snapping around it with bone-crushing force. They hit the ground hard, the snake writhing, twisting, lashing its fangs into whatever it could reach. 1 hit. 2. The dog didn't let go. The man rushed forward, heart pounding, yanking the dog back by the scruff. The snake was already dead, its head crushed. But the damage had been done. The dog staggered. The man caught him. "Easy, easy, boy, you're okay. You're okay." But the dog wasn't. Blood stained the fur on his leg. His breathing came shallow. His body trembled. "No, no, no, stay with me." The man cradled him, eyes searching desperately. "It's okay. I've got you." He stood, dog in his arms, and ran. The vet's office was a blur. Shouts. Doors slamming. The cold sting of antiseptic and the hum of machines. They worked fast. Anti-venom, IVs, monitors. The vet didn't ask how the snake had gotten so close. She only looked at the bite. Her face was tight, her voice quieter than usual. "He knew," she said at one point. "He saw it before you did. That's the only reason you're not the one in that bed." The man sat in the corner, hands coated in dried blood. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. He already knew. The dog stabilized by nightfall. Barely. The swelling slowed. His breathing deepened. His heart rate steadied. But he didn't wake up. They told the man to go home. Rest. Come back in the morning. He didn't. He stayed, curled on the floor beside the steel table where his best friend lay. He laid a hand on the rise and fall of the dog's chest and whispered things no one else would ever hear. I should have seen it first. I'm sorry. You're not just a good boy. You're the boy. The clock ticked. The machines hummed. And outside, the fog returned to the woods. When the sun rose, the vet returned with hopeful eyes. But they faded when she saw the man's face. And the stillness on the table. No more rise. No more fall. No more heartbeat. Just silence. The man didn't cry. Not then. He simply reached out and closed the dog's eyes with one hand, then lifted him as gently as if he were made of glass. They buried him under the old pine on the hill, his favorite spot. The place where chipmunks danced and butterflies gathered. The man placed the collar on the cross and sat beside it, hand resting on the dirt. And for the first time in 5 years, the silence hurt. But something had changed in him. He was alive. He was here. Because of one moment. One leap. One bark. The hill had never felt so empty. Weeks passed, and the woods, unchanged by grief, moved on. The birds returned to their songs, the wind to its whisper, and the sun to its quiet rising through the trees. But for the man, time stuck like mud on his boots. He walked the trails still, but slower, with hands in his coat pockets and eyes fixed on where 4 paw prints once danced ahead of him. No more joyful barking when a squirrel darted across the path. No more golden blur chasing wind through the trees. No more shared silence, only echoes. And in those echoes, he began to hear things. The first time was near the stream. He knelt to rinse his hands and heard a low growl from behind him. Spinning around, his breath caught. But there was nothing there. Just trees. Just wind. But the sound had been real. Familiar. Too real to ignore. He shook his head and walked away, feeling something twist inside him, something raw and unresolved. Days later, it happened again. The porch creaked. But not like before. It was the rhythm he knew by heart. 1 thump, 2 quick steps, pause. Like paws bounding up, then settling in place. He stood slowly, not daring to breathe. But no one was there. Nothing. Still, he stepped out and sat where he always did, staring at the fog that hung over the grass. He spoke softly, just in case. You still out there? The wind didn't answer, but the silence did. He began visiting the hill more often. Not because he believed in ghosts, but because it was the only place that still felt alive. He'd sit by the grave and talk about the weather, the old trails, the way the world was turning colder and more brittle. Sometimes, he brought biscuits, laying one on the stone as if the dog might still sniff it out. Sometimes he left toys, faded, torn, but beloved. And one day, he brought something new. A journal. He hadn't written in years. His hands were more used to calluses than pens. But as he sat under the pine, words started to come. He wrote about the snake. About the moment everything changed. About the guilt he couldn't shake. I should have seen it, he scribbled. You saw it. You knew. You always knew what I couldn't. He paused, then added, almost against his own will. I think I hear you, sometimes. I think maybe, you stayed. That night, the dream came. He stood in the clearing, moonlight painting silver shadows across the grass. And from the trees, a shape emerged. Golden, 4-legged, moving with a purpose. But this time, it wasn't a pup. It was strong, confident, radiating something ancient and calm. The dog stopped in front of him and sat down. They stared at each other. And then the dog lifted his head, once, and let out a single bark. The man woke with tears on his face. The next morning, the trail called to him. He laced his boots and stepped outside, the fog curling at his feet. No hesitation, no coffee, just motion. As he walked deeper into the woods, the sounds of the forest wrapped around him. A branch creaked, leaves rustled, a bird cawed above. But beneath it all, beneath the familiar, there was something new. A rustle, a scamper, the soft whisper of paws just ahead. He stopped, listened, nothing. But when he walked again, the sound returned, like an echo following his step. He turned a corner, and froze. A young pup, sitting in the middle of the trail. Matted fur, too thin, trembling but holding its ground. Its eyes met his, not scared, not wild, just waiting. The man knelt slowly. Hey there. The pup didn't move. He reached out a hand. The pup hesitated, then stepped forward, pressing a cold nose to his fingers. Something passed between them, not recognition, but resonance, like a bell rung twice in different lifetimes. He brought the pup home, fed it, bathed it, wrapped it in a worn towel and held it by the fireplace. No collar, no tags, just lost. Like him, that night, he placed the old collar, the one still hanging on the wall, beside the bed. The pup sniffed it once, then curled up beneath it. And for the first time in weeks, the man slept through the night. He didn't try to name the pup. Names carried ghosts. But over time, the pup carved his own place into the world, different from the one who came before, but never in competition. He was clumsy. He chewed boots. He barked at his own reflection. And still, the man laughed. The hill didn't feel as empty anymore. The silence didn't sting. And one evening, sitting by the grave under the pine, he whispered something aloud for the first time. "You didn't leave me, did you?" The wind answered by shifting the grass. A bird cried in the distance. And the pup pressed his head against the man's leg, silent and sure. But peace, the man had learned, was never permanent. One day, a letter arrived, crumpled and stamped from somewhere he hadn't seen in years. It was from an old friend, someone who'd hiked with him back in the early days, before the cabin, before the dog. "Coming through your woods," it read. "Need a guide. Old places might hold something new." He folded the letter, stared out the window, and sighed. The trail was calling again. Not for memories, but for something else. Something unfinished was waiting in the trees. And this time, he wouldn't walk it alone. The sky was burning with morning. Gold streaks lit the treetops as mist curled over the path, and the air buzzed with the quiet thrill of motion. The man stood at the edge of the woods, backpack slung over his shoulder, boots laced tighter than usual. At his side, the young pup danced in circles, yipping at every falling leaf. The letter was folded in his pocket. The trail called again, not like before, not as an escape from loss, but as an answer to a question still left hanging between the branches. The hike was long and winding. Deeper than he'd gone in years. Past the familiar creeks and stumps, beyond the old landmarks he'd carved into memory with the dog who had once led him everywhere. It felt strange, leading again. He caught himself checking the space behind him, expecting the golden blur of a tail, the soft rhythm of paws. But there was only the young pup, zigzagging ahead, occasionally glancing back to make sure he hadn't vanished. They made camp by the river that night, under stars so sharp they looked painted on black glass. The fire cracked softly, sending little embers spiraling into the dark. The man sipped coffee from a tin mug, staring into the flames. The pup snored beside him, curled up in the old blanket that still smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. And the silence came again. But this time, it didn't ache. It listened. The next morning, the trail narrowed, trees pressed in, the air grew thicker, and the sunlight struggled to break through the leaves. Birds fell quiet. The pup stayed close. Eventually, they found it. The old friend was waiting at a clearing deep in the brush, leaning on a walking stick. Grayer now, heavier in the shoulders, but the smile was the same. They didn't shake hands, just nodded. "You came," the friend said. "Had to," the man replied. The pup sniffed at the stranger's boots, gave a satisfied huff, then trotted off a few feet to chase a beetle. The man crouched by a tree stump, brushing aside moss to reveal a rusted metal plate buried beneath it. "I buried this with him," the friend said, pointing to the spot. "Figured it wasn't safe near the river. Thought you might want it back now." Together, they dug into the soft earth, peeling back years of moss and memory. Inside was a sealed wooden box. The man opened it slowly. Inside, a worn collar. A photo, water-damaged but intact, of two dogs. One golden, one black. And a faded map, marked with a trail he didn't remember walking. "I took his brother after the flood," the friend explained. "The one you didn't find. But they always found their way back to each other. Always." The man blinked, looking between the photo and the pup curled nearby. And then something clicked. Not logic, not evidence. Something deeper. The map led them to a ridge just above the canopy. From there, you could see everything. The rivers curling like snakes through the trees, the sun reflecting on the hills like firelight, and the paths that wound far beyond sight. The pup barked once, sharp and high. then turned. There, just beneath the ridge, something shimmered in the tall grass. Not metal, not light, a glint of amber eyes. The man froze. The friend stepped back. The pup tilted his head. And from the grass emerged a jaguar. Not hunting, not afraid, just watching, the same way the dog used to. The man stepped forward, slow, measured. The jaguar blinked, lowered its head, and disappeared into the brush without a sound. No threat, just a message, just a reminder. The wild remembered. They didn't stay long after that. Some answers didn't need words. Some goodbyes weren't goodbyes at all. On the hike home, the pup walked beside him, not ahead, not behind. In sync. When they passed the place where the snake had struck months before, the man paused. Let the silence sink in. He didn't speak, didn't need to, but the pup looked up at him. And barked once, loud, sure. The man laughed. It wasn't the same bark. But it was his. Back at the cabin, the man framed the photo. Not in a place of mourning, but on the mantel, beside a fresh bowl and the leash for the young one. The hill was greener that spring. Birds louder, wind warmer. And every now and then, on the porch swing, he could still hear it. That old rhythm. One thump, two steps, pause, right beside him, always,